to introduce you. First of all, Christian is a dear mentor, a dear teacher, and one of the most influential, I think, people in the biography of GCRT. So thank you very much for that. Christian is a medical doctor, a psychotherapist, the co-founder of the Berlin Center for Treatment of Victims of Torture. You were closely affiliated with the IRCT for several decades, right? You were the member of the UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. You are an honorary professor of Charité University Medical Center. You are the recipient of Order of Merit of Federal Republic of Germany, which is the highest tribute the Federal Republic of Germany can pay to individuals for services to the nation. I never knew that. It again tells how humble you are. You have done extensive supervision of trauma teams across the world. You have been engaged in numerous research projects ranging from study of Holocaust survivors, secondary traumatization of caregivers who work with traumatized individuals, theatrical processing of imprisonment trauma. Most recently, and it's a very interesting study, the anti-psychiatric movement in Germany. Maybe we can also get to that at some point in the course of the interview. Christian is the author of numerous articles, monographies, and books. Apart from international trauma and human rights work, Christian is a big lover of arts. You play piano, guitar, saxophone, puppet theater. Christian performs. In Potsdam you perform now, right? And to my knowledge, you have also done puppet theater with the UN Subcommittee on Torture, right? So, yeah, this is...
Journey to Absurdistan.
Journey to Absurdistan. Okay.
That was my...
And thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. I've had this for a while in my head to be in conversation with people who have influenced my way of thinking, GCRT's way of thinking, and who are big influences, and also who have been at the forefront of human rights and trauma work, anti-torture work. So thank you very much. And you were actively engaged for about 50 years, right? In trauma world.
Well, I started with the study. Shall I give you?
Yeah.
I started as an ordinary country physician, you know, family physician. My plan was to be a family physician in some village in the countryside. I was a general practitioner. That's how I started. And I did my training in a municipal hospital in Berlin called Moabit Hospital. And during my work there, one incident, I was in the library of the hospital looking for some article about leukemia. I was working in a hematological department. And there was a picture on the wall in this library, very hidden, not very prominent. And I looked at the picture, and it was the photo of a Dr. Großkurt, who was a member of the anti-Hitler resistance movement, who was arrested by the Gestapo and sentenced to death in 1944. And I was curious, who was this man? Because I had studied a little bit, you know, the history of Germany before as a high school student already and student in university. And I started inquiring. Nobody knew this name, you know, it was totally forgotten. And I finally found some old nurse. Yes, his widow is a practicing doctor in Berlin there. You can look her up in the phone book. So I called her, yes, come and see me. And then I spent an evening with this lady, and she opened up Pandora's box about her husband. He was a member of a bigger resistance movement. It was fascinating. And then I started digging deeper, and then I found out that the hospital was mainly a Jewish hospital before 1933, with very outstanding, you know, researchers, reformers in social medicine, you know, sexual marital counseling centers, very progressive, very, you know, really fascinating. And then it became bigger and bigger, and it became a big study. You know, I was a total nobody in the history of medicine. I was a you know, as a young doctor, yeah, I was a total nobody. But somehow this really caught my passion, my attention, and then I got a grant from the government of Berlin. I traveled to Israel. I met some of these Jewish physicians who were expelled in 1933, and I wrote a book about this. And this was my coming out in medicine and human rights. This changed my whole career. You know, the country doctor thing then was no longer on my.
It was the early 80s.
It was in 1984.
84.
I was 36 years old. And that kind of catapulted me into the field of history of medicine. Then I did a study on Holocaust survivors and how they were evaluated by post-war German psychiatrists for the compensation laws. You know, there was the German reparation law, and if you had been in Auschwitz or you had been in some of these death camps and you had survived and you had severe trauma, you were entitled for a kind of health damage pension. But the post-war psychiatrists, one of them were old Nazis, they denied that there was a trauma. They said, you know, weak personality or whatever. And I did a big study on this, and this came out of a book. And then this led me on to, you know, to this whole field of trauma. And then in the early 90s, I founded this center. That's how it started.
Tell a bit more about the center and how it was founded. And
well, this was quite a challenge. You know, the preparation period was exactly when the wall came down. The wall came down, and I mean, Germany was in total, you know, it was a historical moment, you know, when Soviet Union fell apart, the wall opened, East German communist regime collapsed, and there was reunification, and there was so much euphoria in the air that now we have freedom, there's a democratic future for the whole world, you know, Gorbachev was our hero. And it was a coincidence that many doors were open then for new projects. And we got this big grant in 1991, and there was also this Iraq war, the first Iraq war, by the old George Bush. Yeah. And there were all these refugees, Kurdish refugees. Saddam Hussein had driven to the Turkish-Iraqi border, and they were living there in the mountains and starving and freezing. And we had a team of founders for this center. You know, it was not there yet, but we had created a non-profit association, and there were 2 Kurdish doctors in our team. And they said, come on, we have to do something for these refugees now. And we started this big fundraising campaign, Berliner helfen Kurden, Berliners help the Kurds. And we had no experience, and I sat in this little office in the Berlin Medical Association. I had a job there to found this center. And then I suddenly had to do this fundraising thing. We had the press behind us. Somehow it was amazing. We collected 1 million Deutschmarks in 6 weeks because the people were so shocked by this refugee crisis, you know. I mean, now we have refugee crisis all the time. That this had a new dimension. And we had 1 million Deutschmarks, and we financed a field hospital from this, together with the German Bundeswehr, the German Army, and the German Red Cross. And we found a team of doctors, including this Kurdish doctor, flying in there, treating these refugees, giving them shelter, medication. And this was our coming out as a non-profit association. And this made us known in public. And this gave us some credit that we are not just some, you know, a tiny little bird watchers reunion.
And also the time was kind of right,
yes,
right?
The time. We came at the right time. So then, with a lot of luck, we got this grant for founding the center together with the German Red Cross. and we got the grant from the government, and then we started working in the spring of 1992.
And I'm assuming this was one of the first torture rehabilitation
No,
centers.
there were some counseling centers for refugees already in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in Düsseldorf, in Cologne, in Munich, but they were small and they had no physicians, psychologists and social workers. But we were the first with a bigger multi-disciplinary team with physicians, psychiatrists, internists, art therapists. You know, we were, I would say we were an innovative project. But there was a lot of competition and jealousy, you know, for funding. It was not easy.
It comes with the territory.
Huh?
Comes with the territory.
Yes, yes.
Competition. And
So, but we managed, and then we grew over the years. And now we started with 12 people in our staff. Now we have 120.
amazing.
We are a big polyclinic with several departments, youth and children therapy department. We have a housing project for female migrants, you know, victims, because they need special protection because they have all these problems with domestic violence and sexual abuse and all that. So, and we have a scientific department. We have a day clinic, a psychiatric day clinic, and what we managed to achieve that we now are no longer totally dependent on donations. We get several of our projects are funded by the Social Security.
Okay, that's
you know,
amazing.
so it's more stable.
Wonderful.
And one very innovative project that started after my time, that we established a school, a training institute to become an old age people nursing assistant, you know, a kind of nurse assistant for old age people, because this is a big need in Germany. We have a very overage population, and we have a big deficit in staff. And we founded this training institute, and we got the license by the government, and we can train migrants, that even migrants that have no permit of stay, you know, asylum seekers, because there's such need that the government says, okay, you can do the training and you can then get a work permit, and that is some kind of integrating those traumatized refugees from our client population to integrate into German life, to, you know, to make a living, to work. And that's one of our, I think, most important, because during my time, the biggest problem was that these refugees, the traumatized refugees, were locked in these refugee camps with nothing to do, and then, you know, you keep the trauma, the memories keep circling in your head, and work is one of the most rehabilitative forces to have, to gives you value in society, is self-confidence, and we always we were seeking for getting work license for our patients, because in German law, asylum seekers are not allowed to work. So this was a big step.
Countries
Before the center was founded, I traveled around Europe to look at other centers, and I traveled to Copenhagen, and I met Inge Genefke. That was quite an encounter. She was very suspicious of Germans because of the Nazi occupation of Denmark. There was something with her family. But we got along, and you know, there was a split in our RCT very early on, Oasis and RCT. I describe it in my article in Torture Journal about the history of RCT. And there was a whole team expelled by Inge, because Inge had this very dogmatic approach, you know, that you have to talk about the torture all the time, and, you know.
Publicly exposed.
And I had also visited Oasis because I wanted to know what's going on there. And when she found out that I had visited Oasis, she became very suspicious because they were the bad guys, you know. And then she said, well, I don't know if I can trust you. That's how it started, my encounter.
Nevertheless,
Yeah. That was early on.
Yeah.
So I pretty early on knew, be careful, be careful. So, but then there were some people in IRCT that thought, well, it's important to have a German center, you know? Germany is a powerful, economically powerful country in the European Union. We need a German center. So they supported us. They supported us. They invited us to a conference in Norway, in Tromsø, you know, and I met the whole community.
To fast forward 25 or something years
Pardon?
later, to fast forward 25 years
Yeah.
in 2023,
Yeah.
when I look back at
Yeah.
things I hear, anecdotes, stories. Yeah, but what do you ascribe this to? Because people, as you describe in your article, that people who are visionaries, they establish such networks because they are such visionaries, they oppose the system. And then it somehow turns into chaos and fights and splitting unless it's properly managed structurally, right?
Yes.
You describe this in your book and in your article. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yes.
And your research about this?
That's something, you know, when we started, we were idealists, you know, we were inexperienced, we were young and full of energy. And we knew from reading articles about RCT and the split between RCT and Oasis that, you know, there is some kind of risk of splitting and inside turf battles, you know, and inside conflicts also. And we knew this, and then that's why we hired from the beginning a supervisor, a team supervisor. And we had this honeymoon period. The first 2 years were wonderful. We were like a big family. We were celebrating parties in the evening. We loved each other and everything. It was big harmony. And suddenly, it was like a bomb attack. In one supervision session, a Latin American psychologist accused a Kurdish doctor of being an agent of Saddam Hussein's secret service. It was paranoid. It was. They had some competition with who is the better therapist, who knows more, and this was like a bomb. I remember this Kurdish doctor who was a founding member. If I had a gun, I would pull my gun and shoot you in the head right here. And this was, you know, and then hell started. It was sheer hell. The team was split. Half of the team sided with the Latin American psychologist who maintained he was a torture survivor from Chile, and the other half of the team sided with the Kurdish doctor. And I, as the director, every morning I was running around with like a fireman with the hose, extinguishing a fire, and then the new fire broke out there and there. It was sheer hell. It was uncontrollable. It was out of control. And the supervisor, who was actually hired to help us in these situations, he failed. He dropped us. He said, "You're crazy. Goodbye."
I cannot deal with it.
He was a psychoanalyst, by the way. Very narcissistic, guru-type psychoanalyst. That's important to know. He just abandoned us.
He abandoned you, yeah.
He abandoned us. And then we were really in distress. The center almost broke apart. Our donors, this Latin American who had ignited the bomb, he denounced us at
Publicly.
the donors.
Okay.
He called the donors that I'm incapable, that we are, you know. And it almost ruined us. And it took a lot of work to, and we finally found a new supervisor. Well, we actually fired this Latin American because he disrupted our team. We fired him, but he went to court and he found a judge who ordered us to re-employ him.
Okay.
Then he came back for
Okay.
2 years. It was
How
a
do you
nightmare.
get out such situation?
Well, that's a good question. We finally, you know, there was a faction within the team who still supported him, but he was behaving so paranoid, so destructive, so behind, so, wie sagt man, hinterhältig, intriguing. He was spreading intrigues all the time. It was just, so finally the majority of the team said, it's enough, you have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a very powerful man from the Red Cross who was a big supporter and a very decent man who who called him for a meeting, him and me and the employers committee. You know, in German law, in every enterprise you have an employee committee that has some democratic rights to control the director. It's a very good institution.
Yes, yes.
And the employees committee was there, so there was the representative of the team, said, it's enough, this man is destroying our team, he has to go. And there was so much pressure that he decided to go voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing was over.
And how do you bounce back or rebuild?
And then we got a very, very good organizational consultant who would work with us for a whole year, and we reconstructed our whole structure. You know, the position of the director was strengthened because we were these we were these 68ers rebels, you know, and we thought everything has to be democratic, you know, no hierarchy. And it was good because he had a different approach, you know. He was not one of the trauma field, but he helped us a lot to really get some structure and to you know, the psychologists do their work, the social workers do their work, and you do not discuss everything in the team all the time.
Yes.
There's a division of labor, right? And there's a division of competence and of tasks and obligations, and you have a director and a deputy director, and we have team supervision to moderate conflicts, but it is clear that not everybody can decide everything.
Yes.
Because it's dysfunctional. And then things really calmed down and we had a much better time.
And this is what led you to studying this in
And
other
because I had
places.
observed the same problem in many centers in IRCT, even in the headquarters. I mean, this whole Inge Genefke thing was something like that, you know, that there was no structure, there was no control. We had a board of directors that was controlling me and was looking if things were going on. And they were independent people, you know, public persons. There was a judge, a high court judge in there. And I think this is very important, that RCT didn't have an independent board of directors. Inge was everything. Inge was chief of the center. Inge was board of directors. Inge was employee. She was, you know, it was a amalgamation of roles, and that's no good because the controllers control themselves, you know, and that's what I observed in many other places, and that finally helped me or motivated me to do a study on several centers, and then I finally, after 11 years of being director, I said, look, it's enough. The center is now in good shape, and I will hand on to a successor. And I dropped out, and I got this grant from a scientific foundation, and I did this study, and the book came out, The Wounded Healers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you speak there about that organizations with low level of stress, they have formal structures, whereas organizations with high levels of stress, formal structure is one, but then the informal structures and the undercurrents.
The informal power, the informal power holders, who have who are not accountable to anybody.
Yeah.
And you find them in every team. you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Tell me, how was it when you came to GCRT in 2006 to start supervising this team?
Well, it was in a pretty difficult situation.
Yeah.
I remember. There was also a lot of lack of structure, you know. Everybody did everything, and there were some informal power holders who are making life difficult for you. And I immediately could sense this, you know, when we met, and my experience, and I had this great teacher, Johan Lansen, this Dutch psychiatrist, who was a Holocaust survivor himself. He survived as a Jewish child in hiding in Holland, and he had this, you know, he had seen much worse things than anybody in our field, and he was after this big chaos in our own center, he became our case supervisor, and he was my role model. You know, there were in these team sessions people running out, slamming doors, crying, screaming, and he just sat there like a Buddha, you know.
He could contain the situation.
Yes, he was containing. He had this wonderful aura about himself, and he trained me to become a supervisor. He and Ton Hans, his companion. A psychologist from Centrum 45 in Netherlands. And he did his training with Nora Balke and me to learn how to become a supervisor. And you were my first guinea pig.
We were your guinea pigs.
Yeah. And it was a great experience because it was a tough job, you know. I remember some really shaky sessions, you know, with a lot of dynamics, a lot of anger coming up, and somehow, and Ton Hans was my mentor in this. Johan Lansen was already a little bit old, he retired already, but Ton Hans did this. He was like, you know, every session that I had with you, I went through it with him, and he told me, oh, you have done this right, I would do it this way. So, I mean, he was helping me because I was new in the field, you know, as a supervisor. But obviously, it was,
yeah,
worked.
we're still here, and you saw all the people.
Yes, and it was, you know, it was, for me, it was a very moving and very emotional experience because, yeah, you were, I mean, you were, I must say that I admire you people because you are in this small country, you know, that has been harassed for centuries by foreign invaders, destroyed and built up again, and you survived. You preserved your culture, your language, your script, and your joie de vivre, your spirit of life, and your sense of humor and your creativity. And this actually impressed me so deeply. So I really loved to be here and to get to know the country. After every supervision session, I was shown around by your friend Archil. He took me to these hiking tours in Kazbek and David Gareja, and I fell in love with Georgia.
And we are in love with you also. I just want to recall, you know that, but.
So it was more than just a professional experience.
I just want to say for the record, I mean, you've heard it many times from me, but when the war broke out in 2008, and mid-August, Russians were still 40 kilometers away. Your foreign ministry the German foreign ministry was advising you not to travel.
Yeah.
And you got money from the RCT and you rushed here. So I think it was invaluable support. We were, that somebody's got your back, and somebody is so unconditionally supporting and guiding you on a human level and a professional level, that in the midst of the war you were here, you were coming with us to the Gori refugee camps. And I remember we were on an adrenaline. We were working probably 18 hours a day, sleeping 2 hours, and we're on an adrenaline, and we're all waiting for you to come, and we were like, we had these questions in our head: are we doing this right? Is this technique? How do we stabilize? How do we be more effective to bring someone out of dissociation? We had all these things in our head. And at the very first rounds, we have all these questions. And you just told us to go and have a party together. And we went and we cooked together at Sopos. yards so that we could, take a pause.
Yeah, unforgettable.
Yeah, it was
Georgian table in this wonderful house.
And it was an unforgettable feedback for us also that we also need to have a break. We did not believe that we were allowed to have a break. We felt guilty that it didn't happen to us and it happened to other people. So,
it's this heroic mentality that you are not allowed to self-care and enjoy while others are suffering.
Yes, heroic and martyr mentality. And
yeah.
Now that I work with different teams, it is so prevalent and present, and you can't take it away from them because it keeps them going, and it helps them overcome the guilt.
Inge was...
Speaking of hobbies, because you play piano, you play saxophone. You recently learned to play saxophone, right?
Yeah. After retirement.
After retirement, and this kind of throughout your work, art has kept you going, right? And how did you come to the puppets?
Well, I was playing it for my 3 daughters when they were little kids. I started playing at birthday parties, the puppet theater with the witch and the devil and the grandmother, the classical thing. And then I started playing puppet theater, satirical theater at birthday parties for my friends. I was pulling their leg, I mean, in a friendly way, not, And I somehow went on doing this, and for the Berlin Center team at team parties, I played puppet theater and playing the different people. Also the informal leader types, and I was making a character, and they could laugh about themselves. That was very relieving for the team. They loved it. I mean, then there was peace for a while, and they started again. But I discovered that this is a method to ease tension.
Absolutely, yeah. You did it with us too, and we did it Georgia being a mental hospital. It was 2009. I remember there was a lot of.
I didn't understand a word, but I could see how you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Speaking
and
of,
I did it in SPT.
Yes, I
one evening.
Ask you about your work in SPT. But you have seen probably the worst places on earth.
Yeah.
In your mandate as SPT.
Yes. And we had this goodbye party for some people who left SPT.
So SPT is the subcommittee on the prevention of torture.
And we were in this cafe in Geneva, and I was very tense whether I should do it, because sometimes my satirical performances failed. People got offended. Okay. And this happened on other occasions. So I was very tense whether I should do it in SPT. And then our friend, the director of the Start Center in Lebanon, Suzanne, she encouraged me, Christian, you must do it. Come on, do it. We were buddies in the team. We would cooperate very well. And then I finally did it, and I called it the Journey to Absurdistan. And I played us, the committee, entering these countries with these police chiefs and prison chiefs. And people, one of these Latin American lawyers who was important for, I almost peed in my pants laughing. And this other one shouted, Christian, this is therapy for us. It was good. But I was very tense in the beginning.
Tell me about SPT, because you've seen some of the darkest places, probably.
This was a very tough experience, I must say. I joined SPT, I think it was in 2010, and I stayed for 2.5 years. I left, I think, in 2013 or 12, 13. And I started with a lot of energy, and but I'll tell you one incident. We went to Kyrgyzstan, and we saw several mental health institutions. While I was there, we started also not only visiting prisons, but also mental institutions for the handicapped, etc. And I was on the part of the team that visited a huge mental health hospital in Kyrgyzstan, outside Bishkek, the capital. And this was just, you know, this was like Dante's Inferno. This used to be the biggest mental hospital in the Soviet Union. And the conditions the patients lived in was so horrifying, you know. It was like in the Middle Ages, you know. I don't want to go into detail, but it was really, really bad. And, you know, our hands were tied. We could only interview patients, interview staff, write it down, write a report, have a meeting at the end of our visit with the Ministry of Health and say, listen, this is against all human rights standards. There is no adequate health care. There is no, the patients are kept like prisoners, you know. They get no, they have no rights, okay, so, and then the government would say, yes, yes, we take it very seriously, we'll do our best to, but you know, you knew that nothing would happen. They are a poor country, and we could, the only, you know, we had now power. We had now power to force upon them some reforms. We could say, we'll come back in a couple of years, and if you haven't changed anything, we'll write a second report. We never were allowed to make the report public. Only if the government agreed. Some governments agreed, many didn't. And then if after the second visit they still hadn't changed anything, then you may have been allowed to publicize it. But you know, we were like a toothless tiger, our committee. So that was very frustrating. And I had, in Kyrgyzstan, I had this very special experience that was really almost too much for me. We went into this institution for the handicapped. They were kept also in horrible conditions, horrible. And the director was corrupt. He had some of the more able patients working on a cornfield for him. It was his own field, and he made money on it, you know. I came across this young woman who worked in this cornfield, and I started talking to her, and I found out she wasn't handicapped at all. She was completely intelligent, normal young woman. And I asked her, why are you here? And she said, I come from a poor family. My parents are poor, separated, they're alcoholics, and I was living in the street, and the government just took me off the street and put me here. And then I asked the director, show me the record of this patient. Why is she here? And then I found in the record a psychiatric evaluation by some psychiatrist that she suffers from mental retardation.
Fake, yeah.
Fake.
Yes.
And I said, this is not true. This woman is totally normal. She's intelligent. She wants to become a hairdresser. She wants to do something in her life. She wants, and he said, well, but you know, this is by a very renowned psychiatrist. I'm bound to this. No, you're not. You must release this woman. And then, you know, the chief of our team, the United Nations team chief, she wasn't really an expert. She was just an administrator. Yes. She said, you must not help any individual. You can write a report, but you cannot help any individual to get out of the prison. This is not your mandate. Yeah. But I thought, this is impossible. I cannot just leave things like this. And I decided I'll just break the rule. And coming back, I wrote a report, a medical report. I gave it to Amnesty International. I gave it to the Ministry of Health and said, this woman is normal. She has to be released. And I pointed to the fact, because I learned from human rights people in Kyrgyzstan, this is common practice, to just dump people from, you know, socially deprived families in these institutions, you know. And 3 months later, I got a letter from a training institution for young people that she was released, and she's now training to become a hairdresser.
Excellent.
And she thanked me for saving her.
Excellent.
So I thought, well,
it was worth breaking the mandate.
yes.
OSPT.
But I decided, you know, and this was not the only case. So often there were these people in these dark holes in a cell without, and they would clinging to me. Please, doctor, get me out of here. But I couldn't do anything. And this is too much, you know. I just couldn't take it anymore.
What would you advise to the next generation of people who are at the junction of trauma work and human rights work? And
what shall I say? Never give up hope. And it's, you know, it's very hard work. It's very hard work. It brings you to your limits, to your personal boundaries, and there is a time where you have to stop, because it can ruin you. And you remember we talked about it. You said there's an expiration date.
Yeah.
And I had reached the expiration date about at age, I would say 70, 68, 70. And
past that expiration date, I guess one becomes obsessed and with
the
this
people
content,
who could never stop. They can be very destructive, toxic. So, and my advice is that always to keep a balance between doing this work, very hard work, very challenging, also very destructive, and to protect yourself. You have to protect yourself. You must really watch out not to be drawn into the destructive and traumatic dynamics. And so you have to keep some kind of personal life, private life, separated from this, not let the professional invade your private life, you know, because it can have a negative impact on your marriage, on the relationship to your children, to your friends, you know, and to have a part in your life where you can enjoy things, you know, where you travel, you do nice things, you know, you have cultural activities, you know, you do relaxation, you know, you go to a sauna or whatever, things that are good for you, and not have guilt feelings that you enjoy a good meal and you go to a sauna where other people are suffering. This is bullshit. Really, I mean, this martyrdom, heroic self-sacrifice, it's very bad, you know, because it's stupid, you know. I remember there's a famous psychoanalyst, I forget his name. He says, a sick psychotherapist cannot cure.
Exactly.
So what's the point of sacrificing yourself and you become sick?
Or at least work with and process the guilt and why, and like allow space for pleasure.
You have to keep a balance between empathy with the clients, but you should not sacrifice everything for the client. I had this colleague who had this mentality of martyrdom, of self-sacrification. He was going beyond his limits all the time. You know, he was giving money to the clients. He was accompanying them to the court for the asylum procedures. He was invited to his family, and he would become his friend. You know.
Boundaries is another very important issue.
Keep your boundaries. You know, Sigmund Freud, he said you have to have eine Abstinenz. Abstinence. Yeah, you shouldn't get privately involved with the client. You have to, because then you can no longer. You have to keep a professional distance. You're not his friend. You're not his mate. You know, you're his doctor, his psychologist. And he went beyond these boundaries all the time. And then he had this key experience once, he told me. He had this Kurdish client who was all the time asking him for money. And he was telling him all kinds of stories. Now, my mother is coming from Turkey to visit, and my cousin, a young woman, will marry here in Germany. We don't have any money, and my mother is coming for the marriage, and I don't have any money. Can you give me 500 Deutschmarks? And he gave him 500. So next time he came with another story, another 300 marks. And then at one point he was fed up, my colleague. He was an elderly guy, you know, one of these obsessed, very over-engaged, over-identified healers. And said, it's enough, I won't give you any more money. You will have to find your own way how to solve the situation. And you tell me all these stories, I don't know if they are true. Then the patient went to the toilet, cut his veins, came out with bleeding veins. This is what you do to me.
Yeah.
I will have to be forced back to go to Turkey and be tortured again. It's your fault.
Yeah. It's like in the Karpman triangle.
Yes.
Yeah, victim, perpetrator, rescuer, and he wanted to be
And
rescued,
was
he
shocked.
became the victim.
And that was the key experience that...
Yeah. Classical Karpman drama, when a victim becomes the perpetrator.
Yes.
And the
He
rescuer
was
becomes
blackmailing
the
him.
victim.
He was blackmailing him.
That's why the rescuer mentality is never... should never be applied in our... we should be aware of it.
So that's the advice I would give to younger people, that it's a fascinating work. It can be very rewarding, but you have to keep your boundaries. You have to have supervision. You have to have some kind of psychotherapeutic training with self-evaluation, you know, to see your own blind spots, you know, that you don't project your own problems on the patient. That's very important, because I've seen so many people in the field who have their own, wounds, their own psychological problems, their own traumatic experience from childhood or whatever, and they haven't worked through it in a healing process.
Yeah.
And these people can be very destructive, by the way.
Absolutely. And they're in all teams.
Yes, yes. So, and you don't have to do it all your life. You know, there will be other people who can continue. I stopped working as a director, and there are now younger people who are running the center. It's fine, you know. I can go there, they say hello to me, you know. Hi, Grandpa, how are you doing?
Thank you. I think this intergenerational dialogue is
Yes.
very enriching and vital.
Yes.
Because there's so much knowledge, so much wisdom, so much to give, and also so much to learn from the others.
Usually no longer accept any invitations, you know, to do trainings but I make exceptions every once in a while. The other day, I made an exception. I was invited by the Swiss Red Cross to give a presentation at their network meeting of all Swiss centers for torture survivors. And I went, because I like Switzerland and I worked for them many times as a supervisor in the past. And, you know, I'm a little bit out of the field. I no longer work, so I'm not very up to date. But it was amazing, you know. It was fine. I could give them something, you know, and they profited from this workshop, you know, and I looked up in my files and how do you do this? Step 1 to step 2, and it worked, you know. And I said, well, I'm not yet, you know, demented. I can still do it. And it was a rewarding experience, and that I have so much experience, so much to give.
Yes, and it's a lineage, you know.
So I will do it every once in a while, but only, you know, I have to select, because if I do too much, then I must say, when the Ukraine war started, I was really in conflict in a conflict of conscience, because I thought, you have to do something now, you have to, this is horrible, you know, and there are all these refugees, and I was at the Berlin main train station, and there was this big tent, you know, welcoming the refugees from Ukraine, and I have to do something. And then I asked Nora, listen, maybe I can work as a supervisor for these social workers who are receiving these traumatized refugees from Ukraine. And then she said, yes, come here. But then after a second review, I thought, no, I can't do it, because then it reawakens my own. I thought, no, I no longer have the strength to deal with it. It's too heavy. It's too heavy for me.
It's too heavy, yeah.
You know, I'm not. I'm older, and then you don't have the same resistance to cope with difficult situations. You know. So.
And I think you have dealt with your share.
Yes, I have done my share.
Yes,
and I don't have to have any guilt feelings. I did other things. You know, I donated money for Ukraine. I went to the big demonstration in Berlin on the 1-year anniversary of the war, and I went with all these young Ukrainian women shouting, Russia is a terrorist state, and I shouted too. So that was okay. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would want to talk about?
Let me think. Well, I wonder, you know, when we started in '92, there was this optimism, you know, that the world would become a better place, and that dictators were on the retreat because the Soviet Union had collapsed. In Latin America, dictatorships had collapsed, you know. And in Turkey, there were suddenly more human rights accepted. So there was all this euphoria, all this hope. And I remember these RCT people said, we can abolish torture in 5 years. And I said, but there was this...
Yeah, those were different times, yeah.
Many illusions. And then things really started going backwards after a while. And I remember the Chechen war. Yeah. That was already in 2002 when Putin came to power.
Putin came to power in 2000. The second Chechen war, which was much more brutal, was during and under Putin. Putin was not yet president, but he handled the war. The Abkhazian war started then, and then we're in the Balkans. That's why the Georgian story got completely lost, you know, Abkhazia, because Balkans was such a big thing in the middle of Europe. Then there's Rwanda.
So now, I mean, all these barbaric leaders, you know, it's a nightmare. And I sit there and I'm too old and I can hardly stand it. I've fought my whole life to stop these barbarians, you know, to somehow get in their way. And it's hard for me to sit there without, you know, it's very hard.
I think also solidarity has also multiplied.
Yeah.
And in those days, it was professional help. Now activism is not professional, but it's broad. And for instance, Ukraine, it's maintained by volunteers. This is the example that I know. There's so much solidarity networks across. Social media has its very dark side, but it also has its right sides. It's a big battle between the evil and the good, and you have all the sociopath, narcissist leaders, men in power, and then you have movements like grassroots movements. So
that's the good side. In Germany, it's amazing the solidarity with the Ukraine. You know, people host refugees in their apartments. This has never happened before. Many Germans just, you can stay with us, and they stayed with them for a couple of months, and then they found their own. It's amazing. We never had this huge solidarity before.
There's less optimism today than there was in the 90s, for sure, because we hear on a daily basis so many terrible things. But there's also more interconnectedness. That's maybe my optimism, you know. more togetherness across. You know, I can be connected with someone in Sri Lanka now, and we can do something jointly. We should always continue the struggle. And you have passed the torch, so now it's our responsibility to continue the struggle.
That's a nice. That's a nice end.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yes. Great.
Thanks a lot.